Hello and welcome to another episode of the Maple Dialogues. This is your host Raman Verma. At the Maple Dialogues, we bring you the real immigrant stories that inspire and inform. Today we are joined by a guest who moved to Canada from Kenya 25 years ago. While his journey was not filled by extreme struggles, it definitely took persistence, applying for thousands of jobs before landing his first job after 2 months of living in Canada. He shares with us what was it like to adapt the Canadian culture, learn the local lingo, and balance his Kenyan identity by staying connected to the culture and to the community, from embracing Canada as a home to reflecting on the fast paced life in Canada compared to a slow moving life in Kenya. His perspective is grounded and refreshing. This episode is a clear reminder that every immigrant story is unique and different, and setting the right expectation can make all the difference. So let's welcome Matthew Macharia to another episode of the Maple Dialogues. Matthew, thank you so much for making time to record this with us. I really appreciate that, Matthew.
Thank you for having me.
Matthew, we're going to talk about your journey and how did you get to the place that you are at today, and also talk about your experiences on the way, good or bad. And I'm hoping that you can share some stories with us as you came to the point that you are at today. Where is Matthew from? Let's start with that. Where did Matthew come from?
Right.
And what seeded the thought in Matthew's mind that he should go to Canada? What inspired him? What was the thought process behind it?
So thanks again for having me. My name is Matthew. I'll start from the old days. I'm originally from Kenya, from a what you'd call the middle class home. And without going too fine to history, I'll go straight into what made me come to Canada. I worked in one of the embassies back in Nairobi, which is the capital of Kenya. And my at one point in my life, 7 years of being there, I had gone as high as I could go, and I was looking for other opportunities. And Canada was not deep thought for me. I ended up deciding on Canada just because I knew a little bit more about it, but not really because I truly had a desire to come here. So
Mhm.
it's almost accidental that I came to Canada. I looked at the requirements at a professional level, and I looked at my career, and I said to myself, like, I could try and see why people go to Canada and what's so good about Canada. So I'll go see for myself. So when I decided to move here, it's because I saw quite a number of people trying to immigrate to Canada. I came from a region of the world where there were lots of surrounding countries that had problems, economic problems, wars, and instability. And so some of them were coming as refugees, others were coming as just, looking for other opportunities. But among my friends, nobody ever thought about Canada. It wasn't a thought process. It was everybody that I knew, including myself, thought of Canada as a big block of ice where there where there are polar bears and penguins and that kind of thing. So it wasn't really common among my friends, at least the ones that I know, to come this way.
This is a good segue into the next question that I was going to ask is, did you have, obviously you just explained you had an image of Canada in your mind on how it probably looked like, and that was probably partially, I know part of that was a joke that that you made, but did you really think Canada was like a block of ice, or
Well, I knew it was very cold.
yeah?
I knew it would be, they have harsh winters and cold, very cold season. I didn't know that they had a very hot summer as well. So to me, I just thought of it as a fairly cold place. That's the image I had in my head. Maybe
Okay.
not all covered in snow, but at least very cold.
The Canada that you had imagined that is going to look like, because it was lack of internet back in the day, the times that we're talking about, there was not that much of footages on internet about how other places look like, and people were not putting so much of content at that time. So everybody have an image of where they're going and how it's gonna look like. So how was it like for you? Was it very, very different from what you had imagined, or was it close to what you were imagining?
Because of my job, I actually had an idea of, some of the images. There were not as many as some of the other countries, what you'd see in movies, in the US, in Australia, in the UK, but I had a few uh, pictures that I had seen of Canada, and I arrived in Canada almost to the day now, 25 years ago in 2000. And the day I arrived, it was actually snowing. It was very cold. It was the spring, and I had timed it in such a way that I'd come in the spring, so I have a lot of time to settle down before the next winter comes. For me, my thought process was always around the winter. So I wanted to get settled before winter comes. And when I arrived, it was very cold. It looked very busy, much busier than I had seen in the pictures. The pictures give you this image of a very peaceful, calm place. And you get there and you get out of the airport, and it's just traffic chaos, traffic everywhere, people honking, lights everywhere. And yeah, it gave me a different idea or a vision of what I was expecting to see.
So you said 25 years, so we are talking about year 2000.
The year 2000, yes.
So let's talk about your job search experience, your professional job hunting, and how did that all of that go? You came as an skilled immigrant, right? So you must have come under like some kind of category.
Yes.
So when you came here and you started looking for a job, how did all of that start? And did you find a job that you had the skills for, or did you end up doing something that was totally different from what you had the skills for?
By the grace of God, I got into an area that I had trained for, which is in IT. But it was very difficult to find employment in those days, because I think even today we still have a lot of employers who would ask you and put you in a catch-22 situation where they say that if you want to apply for the job, you need to have Canadian experience. And the thing is, without a job, you can't get Canadian experience. And without Canadian experience, you can't have a job. It's not that easy. So it was difficult to find a job. It was actually very frustrating. I remember I would apply for more than 50 applications per day, every day of the week, including the weekend. And I almost had very little response from the applications that I was sending out. So it was very difficult, but I persisted in wanting to pursue something in my field. But that is the fortunate part, because I met people along the way. You take a cab and you'd find somebody, you'd strike a conversation with the driver, and you find that he's a trained doctor. But when he came to Canada, he needed to go back to school for 7 years and get the Canadian certification, because they don't accept the certification from most countries. And so they're forced to go back to school, even if it's not for the full 7 years, but at least maybe 4 years, they have to go back to school, retrain. And so they were not able to do this when they moved here with their families, with children. And so what happens is they end up doing all kind of menial jobs, such as driving taxis, working in factories, doing building management in as caretakers, and all kind of manual kind of labor. But I personally was blessed that I did not have to go through that, because I had gone through different types of professional certifications that are worldwide accepted. Like certification, in those days, Plus was popular. So I had a lot of that with me. And so that helped me to persist in pursuing a career in my field.
When you say that people struggle to find jobs in their own field, and they are trying to use and show the same certifications, the same education that they had used to apply for Canada as a skilled immigrant. And the government have no issue with that, and they totally accept all of that, and hence that's why you qualify under that certain category, and then you fly, you leave your native country, and then you come here, and then using the same certifications, same certificates, same education degrees, the employers here say no, that's not valid here. So
Yeah,
I hear that as a very, very common story from people that I've been talking to.
that is right. And that is, I think, maybe a failure in the whole system.
How long did it take you to get your first call back for an interview, and then approximately how many after that you had to go through to find your first job?
Probably did about 3 or 4 interviews, but I'm talking about having to go through more than 1,000 applications, I believe. And I got 3 or 4 interviews. Some of the interviews you go in and they'd say, "Oh, you're overqualified," and stuff like that. So I actually started my first job 2 months later, 2.5 months after I came into this country, after I landed in this country. It was a frustrating 2 months because you have the promise of, hey, I'm going for a better life. There's lots of jobs, there's lots of everything, and then you get here, and then you can't find employment. And I was not even in a bad way compared to some of the people I've met, people who've lasted a year before they could find anything, and so they have to come with a lot of financial support for upkeep before they can actually find gainful employment. So it is very difficult. Yeah, it's not easy as when someone says it's difficult, believe it.
I mean, 2 months is not that bad compared to the horrific stories that you hear from many other people,
Right.
where they come to a point that they run out of all of their savings that they brought with them, and no new income has started yet, and they've run out of whatever they had.
Right. And I don't know about the statistics today, but I remember back then the statistics were that um, every every year so many people return. I believe we had more than 30% of the people who came returned back in the first year, but I don't remember the rest of the statistics. But a lot of people do end up going back from frustration after having either not found work or finding work and work doing career that was not something that they trained for or something that they desired to do.
Before we move on, just one point. I have an opinion on that Canadian experience, thing that, many employers throw in, right? Do you think that many of these employers, by Canadian experience, they mean working culture of Canada and not necessarily the skills that you have?
That possibility does exist, but at the same time, they wouldn't know what the working experience in other countries are like to want to say, I don't want that type of working culture and I want only the Canadian type. So there is that discrepancy over there where they cannot tell or cannot identify that your working experience is actually not relevant or not identical to what you would experience in Canada.
Okay.
Right.
If we move on, as part of your job search and you interacting with various people, other than the things that you already mentioned in terms of people asking for Canadian experience, people calling you that you are overqualified for certain things, did you ever feel that some of this could be racially motivated?
I didn't feel it very commonly. I think it exists. I've heard of people talking about it. And if it did happen, I know it's illegal to express it, but it doesn't mean that it doesn't happen. And so it could have happened and maybe it was very well hidden from me. So I cannot honestly say that I clearly experienced or noted that it was a racial reason that they were trying to back out. I wouldn't say that most people are very comfortable with people of their own kind. And so when they see someone of a different background, they are likely to have a little bit of resistance to having to work with them. I believe it could be more of a bias, yes, but I'll be honest and say that racism does exist. I've heard of many stories. All you need to do is meet a few people and talk to them about their experience. Those who have had experiences with, for example, police or other kinds of authorities, you can tell for sure they got treated differently because of the color of their skin or their background, their religious expression or whatever. So some of those do exist for sure. It's one of those things that are very difficult to get rid of. For me, the fortunate thing is depending on which part of the country that you live in, right? And depends on the kind of population in your city. So I moved to Toronto. Toronto is very metropolitan. It has a lot of cultures, people from all parts of the world. So I think there's a general acceptance that you're going to keep running into different races of people. But I'm pretty sure if I went to a place that was more isolated, I probably would feel very different and be giving a very different story. So it depends on where you go. If you go to the big cities where they're multicultural, you're likely to fit in a little bit easier compared to if you go to a more isolated city or town.
So, moving on, Matthew, how did you keep close to your native culture and if there is any native Kenyan language, do you still practice that and you speak that? I know Swahili is well spoken there, right? Swahili probably is the national language of Kenya.
Swahili is a national language in most of East Africa, and hopefully in the future, one day will be the national language across Africa. Obviously, it's a mix of some of the African languages and the Arabic languages, and they came up with this language, back in the day when they did the trading, they had to communicate, and so they developed Swahili as their common language. So if you move to the Middle East, you might find places where people speak Swahili as well. So it's a bit more well-known language. Now, I found a good community here, a Kenyan community that has a healthy population. And so, by becoming a member and getting to get together in celebrations and social gatherings, I was able to keep in touch with people I know and people who are from the same background as me and have the same culture, the same beliefs, and also the same kind of upbringing that I had.
How frequently do you visit back Kenya? Is it a few times a year or like once in a decade? Like how's that frequency like?
So everything always depends on a couple of factors. One is when you have a job, it's about how much time you can get off. I was very surprised to find that when you move to Canada, most companies or most employers will start you off with 10 days of vacation. And so 10 days is very little. When you have to travel across the world, you're going to spend half of that time just traveling to go and the other half coming back. And so you have a very small window in between to see your family, to visit different places in your home country. So depending on where you live, it can become a bit of a challenge. Many people go back, once every few years. I try to go back every year as much as I can. The earlier years when I was still in the country, it was very difficult. So I had no plans. I just tried to get settled in, but after several years of struggling in Canada and living in Canada, and you get to a place where you're more able to go and visit your home country a bit more frequently. Also depends. The other factor would be the price, how much it costs to go there, because when you look at the distance, it increases the cost when you travel that far. Then you have to think about things like the time zone changes and all that. So most people might be able to make it at least once a year. It's very unlikely that they can go more than once a year. And then your stay there depends on how much time off you can get from your employer or from your whatever form of employment you do.
Are there any direct flights from Toronto to Kenya, or do you have to always take a detour from some other place?
You always have to take a detour, unfortunately, which is both also good in a way because for a flight that far, you don't want to sit about, I would say roughly 14, 15 hours just sitting in one flight. So it's good to break it up. But in most cases, you'll find that your flights will break up in Europe, the hubs of many of the connecting flights. Or you could move down, and I think there's a flight that takes off from Washington, D.C. to Nairobi direct. But you have to still go to Washington, D.C., which is still a break in your, it's not direct.
Is there any story, Matthew, that you can share in terms of you trying to assimilate into the culture, but certain things are done differently, and then you laughed at that situation later on? Is there any story that comes to your mind?
One time when I took my wife down to her place of work in the night because for safety reasons, we I used to go with her, take the bus, go with her down to her place of work, which was quite a distance, almost an hour ride. And then on the way back, I went and I knew I could use the subway. So I went to the subway and I looked at the what it said subway and I tried to get in, but the door was locked and I couldn't understand why I couldn't get in. And then the window was open and I looked inside the window and I saw sandwiches on the, and I was like, why do they have sandwiches in the subway? I didn't know there was a sandwich chain called Subway at the time. So I was, I found that very, very
Yeah.
odd. And very unusual because as a newcomer, you don't know some of these things. They surprise you, um, and the people around here laugh at you because they know the difference between a Subway sandwich and the Subway train.
And sometimes I know English is almost like a second language in Kenya, right? So,
Right.
but that's more like British English, same as in India.
Yeah.
And then certain things have different names, believe it or not, in British English. Like they're called
Yes.
differently. Like certain
Yes.
vegetables are called differently. So
Right.
something happened with me as well. The first time I went to order a pizza, the guy asked me what toppings you want, and I told the guy onion, tomatoes, and capsicum. And the guy looks at me, he goes, "What's capsicum?" And I point at the green pepper, and he goes, "That's green
Right.
pepper." That's the
Yes,
first time.
because right in North America, capsicum sounds like a type of medication. Uh,
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's funny.
And so, yes, the language can be a barrier. Even coming from Kenya, we had the Kenya was a British colony like India. And so, yes, we had the British English and we call the things the British way. For example, another example that, like what you said, is you ask somebody, where's the lift? Now, over here, they don't call it a lift, they call it an elevator. Lift means something like you'd see in construction or in the warehouse that would, lift huge, heavy objects from one place and move them to somewhere else. And so when I asked for a lift and they looked at me in a strange way and they cannot figure out why in the world does this guy want a lift? Before they understood, they said, "Oh, you mean elevator, right? Elevator. Okay, I'll show you where that is."
That's funny. Okay, that's good. How's life now? Is life good? Can you call Canada home now?
So I always had it in my mind because when I left my country was safe. There was no wars going on. I lived an average middle class lifestyle. So I was okay. And so that was always my first home. When I came to Canada, Canada was my second home. I became a Canadian citizen and Canada over time joined up as my number one line, and I have two first homes. So Canada is now my first home after 25 years, and Kenya is also my first home because I try to go every year, and I feel more comfortable at home in Kenya than I feel here. And the reason for that is that Canada is a fast-paced country. You have to continuously be working hard. Life goes by very fast. You don't have too much time to socialize, to rest. You're always running from here to there. You've heard of people with two or three jobs. So it is hectic. It is now my home, but it is a hectic country. So if you like it nice and peaceful and easy, Canada is North America in general is not really the place to have that kind of easy lifestyle, right? And I remember when I started working in my current job, I looked down one day, I was so busy. The next time I looked up, it was 10 years later. And I looked up and I said, oh, where did the time go? And I looked down again and I did some work and I looked up again. Another 10 years had gone by. And I realized, hey, I've been at this job for 20 years. So, yes, time moves very fast. I remember visiting back home and one Saturday morning, I said to myself, well, I need to do A, B, C, D. So I ran out and I moved with the pace that I move with here. And I did so many things and I came back and I was like looking at my watch and I was like, oh, it's only 11 a.m. I thought I still have the rest of the day. So the time does move very fast and you get used to that lifestyle. And it becomes a challenge when you go back home and people are moving slow and they're dragging their feet. And it starts to feel frustrating because you're just so used to another level of speed of doing things.
Do you have any guidelines, suggestions for newcomers to Canada that you can share?
The one thing I always say is set your expectations right. You have to listen to the people who are out in the field. People who are in Canada most of the time will tell you the truth most of the time. And I'll say that you need to listen to two or three or four sources. Don't just listen to one person. Just set your expectations correctly. Expect to be very fast-paced. Expect that do your homework. Do your homework so that it doesn't become a surprise to you, as has been to so many. We see the movies and people think like you'll move to Canada and it's a movie lifestyle where you have big houses, nice cars, and the jobs are easy, professional jobs, and then you get here and then you find that it's not what you thought it was going to be. I've lived in apartment buildings where I've seen when someone would open the door and I'd see inside and they just have mattresses on the floor. I hear them complaining of things like roaches and bed bugs. And so you have to set your expectation right. That's the first thing. And second thing, you really need to know why you're coming. What are you coming to do? Are you coming to depend on the system? Are you coming to chase a career? Are you coming as a student? And if you're coming as a student, you have to stick to your guns and say, know yourself. I came as a student. I'm going to be a student. Don't fall off the tracks and start doing something else and try to disappear in the system. You're coming as a student, come as a student, finish, and look for a career in that life. See if you can find a way to stay in the country or move to another country that maybe is more favorable, or even back in your home country to go back and build your home country. But if you have some of this, you have a good head on your shoulders, you should be fine. As long as you're not coming to be swayed, you have to know yourself, stick to your roots and stay focused. Otherwise, it's easy to be swayed, to be influenced, and then start losing your way.
Yeah, that's good advice. And you are right, hardships will come, and you got to have that end picture, the the end point, the goal that you want to get to, and then
That's right.
keep working towards it instead of giving up, because some people, as you said, would face a lot of hardships trying to get there.
That's right. That's right.
Okay, that's amazing. And finally, I want to ask you, Matthew, coming to Canada, in putting it in perspective now after 25 years of being here, would you change this decision, go back in time and change it and stay where you were? Or are you happy with the decision that you took in your life?
That's a double-edged sword to use because there's two ways of looking at this. One is, yes, you could say that you'd probably be way ahead had you stayed back in your own country. There's a good chance that you'd be way, way ahead of where you are by moving to a different country because you hit the reset. And you could also say that it depends on the country you come from again and the kind of hardships you have there. Obviously, there are people who are in war-torn countries and that kind of thing. So for them, this would be a great great decision or opportunity for them to move to a place like this, where you're blessed, you have a peaceful country, they are not fighting with anyone. But again, set your expectations because you know that life is going to light a fire on you and you're going to be running like headless chicken in a country like this. I would say that if I had a chance to do this again, I'm not sure. That's why I'm saying it's a double-edged sword here to answer this because it has its good sides of it. There are certain things that you know you can accomplish and do in life that you wouldn't have done in your home country. If I could do this all over again, if I had to make the choice to move to Canada, if I had the choice to move to any other country, I probably would have done it still, but maybe I'd have made a few choices differently along the way.
Amazing. And any closing words, Matthew, before we go?
My closing words before I go is always know yourself, know what you're looking for in life. Don't be easily swayed by what you see in the news or what you hear from people. Trust in yourself, trust in what you know. You should be okay.
Well, with that, we come to the end of the episode here, Matthew. Thank you so much for making time tonight to talk with me and share your story. I'm sure many people can learn from this and hopefully repeat the success story that you have built. Thank you again, and I wish you all the best.
Thank you. You're very welcome.
Take care, Matthew. Bye for now.
All right. Bye.